Let me know when it's time to take it.
Whenever you're ready. So you feel about things. Thank you. Try to share some
So typical Michelle fashion, I tried to have lunch before I got here. I spilled salsa all over my blouse.
Oh
So I'm gonna have to work hard to cover my blouse.
We'll just put the anti-salsa filter on.
Yes, thank you very much. That would be much appreciated. All right.
Is everybody ready?
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Mayor and the City Manager's monthly press conference. We are meeting with all of you. There's many great things happening in the community. One of those things is that the City Manager and I want to celebrate the fact that we just received a great award. Our community gathered together, and we are going to have $10,000 that are going to go to Highland Park so that we could do a lot of work with children. In the last month since we've met, I know that there was a lot of concern with regards to my health. I want to say thank you to all of you that reached out in one way or another. I can tell you, as you guys can see, I'm back at it and in full strength and ready to serve our community. Now, I know that this room is a little bit fuller than what it typically tends to be because everybody's expecting us to have further conversation, as I promised yesterday, with regards to the incidents that were published in Capital Journal with regards to the arrest of Mr. Timothy Harris. And before I go any further, I would like to say that there is no harder job than to be in public office. And that not only goes for a mayor, for a city manager, but it also goes for our fire department and our police department. Because every single thing that we do is not only scrutinized by ourselves, but it's also scrutinized by the community. And I think that as a community, I'm calling all of us to look at things with a lens of compassion. And that compassion is not only my request to us as citizens towards your body, but not only a level of compassion for our officers, but also a level of compassion for our citizens. I think that one of the things that we often don't talk about, especially when you have a position of leadership, is the fact that all of us deal with something called implicit bias. And as a community and as citizens, period, every one of us has a layer of experiences, has a layer of thoughts, a layer of situations that we've all learned to use to process and respond to different situations. Now, if you were to ask the city manager regarding something related to policy and operation of the city, he is going to speak to you maybe in a language that the city manager can speak in that will be very complicated for people. I can tell you that I make the joke on a regular basis that when I am sitting on the city hall bench and I'm talking about bonds and stocks and things that very much excite me, I know that many individuals look at me like I'm crazy because they don't understand a lot about the bond issues and don't understand maybe about the CAFR. And in the same fashion, what ends up happening is that because we are so accustomed to communicating in a certain way, there could be a little bit of misinterpretation because although we speak, for the most part, the same language, even though my English may not be perfect, is we also speak the language that we have with ourselves. And I say these things because in a time such as this, the way that we operate as a city is drastically changed. One of the books that I've been reading is Thank You for Being Late, and it talks about how, as humans, we are all having a really hard time adjusting to things the way that they're happening right now. Technology is changing at a pace that we cannot keep up with. And us as humans are trying to keep up with things as they occur. And you may be asking, where is she coming from with all this? Here's the deal. Policing will never be the same. And it will never be the same because now we have access to cameras. We have access to things. And in the process of all of those things changing and everybody having more access to these things, you're going to have individuals with their own implicit biases taking a look at this. My statement yesterday were inflammatory, maybe on both sides. There were individuals that emailed and talked to me and said that they did not appreciate that I made the statements. They interpreted that my statements were negative maybe towards the police officers. There were some individuals that talked to me and emailed me and said that they did not like that I was too neutral. that I celebrated many of the things that we're doing great in the city of Topeka. What I can tell all of you is this: sitting down and going through these experiences are extremely difficult. And it would be very easy to take the decision not to speak about it. But my commitment has been and will always be that I will be transparent and honest, flawed, very flawed, when I communicate with all of you. But I will always speak to you from the heart. The images that we saw were extremely concerning to the community. Absolutely. When individuals don't have the training that our police officers have, the first response is always going to be from your gut, because it's difficult to see any individual being hurt, regardless of the circumstance. I think that the best analogy to explain it is, you would not expect for you to have the same reaction that a surgeon has when they come and see an operation. They do this on a regular basis. They see death on a regular basis. They see trauma on a regular basis, and their reaction to things is very different. And we don't have the privilege of maybe having the education and the training that they have. What I can say is, I am committed to listening to both sides of the aisle and have conversations. And this experience, just like many more that will come, because we just don't know, are going to be opportunities for our community to have dialogue and talk and learn about what happens on both sides. We are committed to maintaining open communication with all of you in the public and with all of our staff members. And we may not always agree, but it doesn't mean that we stop talking. It means that we reach out to understand each other so that we know that in the end, we're all one community, and we should maintain the status of being one community, not only in the good, but especially in the hard times. So with that, I will share with the city manager to see what he's got to share.
Well, I think the first thing I want to take off of what you said is, even today, a previously scheduled class was conducted by our police department. Sergeant Ruben Salmeca, did I say that right? Sorry. He was teaching a class today to a group of citizens about the fair and impartial policing that we do. It was a 2-hour class, and then they had an opportunity to go through the Milo training, which is putting them in the shoes of an officer and getting them the opportunity to understand the things that they're taught on how to handle it. And I think that that kind of outreach gives the opportunity for citizens to see what a police officer, the type of training that we give them. And that's just one slice, and we've done a lot of other training. We have more that we're continuing to schedule with cultural sensitivity training is coming this year to the department in some other areas, and that doesn't even count already de-escalation training, use of force training that we do. So we're trying to do the best we can to equip the officers with the tools they need in order to be able to police the community in the right way, so that people feel that when they have a response by an officer, that they're going to be treated fairly and appropriately when it comes to the use of force in other areas. So I think that's the right way to go. I think we can't let up. With that, our commitment continues with the SPCP, the Strengthening Police and Community Partnerships Council. They had their first meeting today, or earlier this week, and have already set up a schedule to plan to meet twice in October and twice in November, and then start meeting once a month thereafter to start accomplishing the goals and priorities that were established from the day-long meeting that we had. That hasn't gone away. We know there are issues that we need to address that eventually will strengthen our community and make it better able to understand in total what's going on in our community. So those things continue.
And I would like to add to that one of the things that we were discussing was we would love to present for the media and maybe even for the community one of the trainings that what he calls the Milo training, which is what the general public considers the shoot or don't shoot training, in which individuals get an opportunity to be there, understand a little bit, of course have a little bit of training before they go into the simulator, but then have the opportunity to just experience this. Because I think, again, we are going to constantly have situations that are going to be pressed out in the media, shown out, and we want to ensure that as much as we can, that we educate our citizens so that we are all able to understand what's occurring. We may not ever 100% understand, and we have to be okay with understanding that. Our commitment is that we understand that we have room for growth, room for communication, and we have the commitment that if something is right, we will stand by what is right, but if something is wrong, we will do what we need to do to correct those things.
The only other thing I would add is that we are starting a new program in October. There was a release out on it, food for fines. Anybody that has an issue, and there's a list in the press release on what's addressed, but basically it's where if you bring 10 cans of non-perishable canned goods to us, you receive a $25 credit towards a fine that you have scheduled that needs to be paid. So that provides an opportunity for us to help the individual, because that's less cost to them, but then also help the food pantry, and it is going to help Topeka Cares, I believe is the right organization. So that's a great opportunity also for us to do at the right.
It's the Topeka project.
Oh, excuse me, yes, I missed that. Project Topeka, excuse me, is a volunteer organization. They distribute non-perishable food items. I didn't read far enough down, excuse me. So I think that's a great opportunity for us to be able to help others within the community as well as they're doing that. So.
And that's not for your water bill, that's just for municipal?
That's for municipal court fines, correct.
You guys have more questions then?
Yes, we are.
Okay, yesterday you had mentioned a citizens layer, you just talked about it. Now, you are proposing that. Who would you propose that to? Who would make the decision to make that a reality? And is that something you're still pushing?
Well, I don't think that it's something that I'm pushing. One of the things that really excited us when we were talking to hiring Chief Cochran, and we were in the search, was one of the ideas that Chief Cochran had, like, his great idea of establishing the CIT, was he was very interested in finding a way that we could have a citizen that would be trained and work for the city manager, for example, and that citizen would be part of doing the evaluation. Because again, I talked about implicit bias, and I don't know if people understand what that is. Every one of us has experiences that we all share, a language that we share, and we normalize certain things. And sometimes it's great to have somebody that is outside of our in circle to help us look at things. And that is what the chief had said. I think that it was a great idea, so it was a great opportunity for us to bring it forward.
I've been through the training, the virtual reality training that they have when they first brought it in. It's pretty cool for those shoes. But one of the things the chief has also mentioned, that if you don't understand what we do or why we do what we do, is take a citizens academy. Have you yourself or the city manager thought about going through that citizens academy yourself, either with the TPD or the sheriff's office?
My son did the Citizens Academy. I have not done it. What I have done with the police officers is ride-alongs. And it is an enlightening experience. It just absolutely wakes you up. The other thing that I think is worthy of mention is, as we're trying to educate the community, I know that the chief made sure that we shared a lot of our procedures so that people understood what leads to what action. And that's huge transparency in our community that we didn't have before. I mean, he's been sharing a lot of the steps that our police officers take in the way that they process. So that's another thing that will help, because I think that information was shared, I think it was yesterday or day before yesterday.
Who's that?
Chief?
Policy's been out for a while.
Policies, yeah. February, March is when we got some
Mhm.
policies on.
Yeah.
With the incident that happened with Mr. Harris, you had kind of made a comment, and you speaking as the mayor, for the city of Topeka, generally we don't talk about pending litigation. Now you've made that, you've kind of made a little bit of yesterday with your comments, a little bit of a comment, you said it was disturbing, I believe, I can't pull out.
What I stated was that the citizens had reached out to me with their concerns, and I understand that video was difficult to watch. I don't think that any human being sits down and watches somebody, regardless of the circumstances, become hurt and be excited about watching a video like that. So I was acknowledging the fact that the community had seen something, and I was saying, I have seen what you are seeing, and never is it a good circumstance to see somebody that's getting hurt.
Just wanted clarification on that.
Thank you for clarifying.
I wondered after watching the video yesterday if some action was about to take place. You were discussing just now about the possibility of a civilian being employed by the city manager and being part of this board, which I guess would provide a citizen layer.
Mm-hmm.
How close are we to that happening?
Well, we have the job description, we have the information that would outline what part of their responsibilities would be. That's been presented to me by the chief. for my consideration, and so we'll be looking in more detail, to look at the funding for that, because that's not currently a funded position within the city. So we need to look at what we can do in order to be able to consider funding the position. So a few things to look at and to clarify, but it isn't a new subject, because as the mayor stated, it was one of the items that was visited by Chief Cochran when he was interviewing for the position. So this is something that he front burner. It'd be a part of the review of the officer's actions in determining whether or not that was appropriate use of force, those types of things. So it's a level of review that we've not seen in the community in the past, and it's something that we're looking at and feel like if we are looking at having citizen involvement, that's the best way that we can. It's probably not citizen, because the chief's also talked about involving people on his advisory council in that process too. He works with them on various issues and initiatives that the police department has and explains them to him, gets feedback from members of that council on those ideas, and so there's that citizen involvement as well. But still trying to figure out exactly how it would work and what would be fun.
Would it be a full-time position, and also would there be other duties that person would have to be responsible for? Because if it is full-time, I would think that.
Well, I think I'm desirous of having it being a full-time position. I can't answer that fully. I think that would probably be the best way in order to have them available to handle situations as they come available. But I think that it would not likely be their only duty and responsibility, but it can be one of the primary reasons that we're looking at hiring that position.
Mayor, were there any misunderstandings of what you said yesterday?
I wouldn't say that there were misunderstandings. I can tell you that if you look at the thread of comments under the Facebook post, you had both spectrums being represented. And I expected that. I think that, that's the reason that I talked about biases. I think that every one of us in our community has some sort of interaction that helps paint the way that we see things. And you could see that that was very clear in the comment section of Facebook, because there were people that were saying thank you. There were people that were saying, derogatory comments about the gentleman if he would have followed orders. There were people that were saying, he shouldn't have gotten hurt. You have all the gamut of comments that are coming through, and I think that that is expected. Everybody has a different lens. My goal with my statements is to ensure that we remain in communication as people have questions. Now, Sean is correct. When we are in pending litigation, there's only so much that we can talk about. And if you've noticed, I have been very open with regards to the comments that the community has made. There was a request for me to make, I don't think there was a request, but there was an expectation, I think, that I would say something with regards to the comments that I was getting. And I very willingly so ensured that I could say something still without putting any of the litigation issues out into the public. And that's a very interesting line to walk, but as much as I can do it, I commit to continue talking to my public.
Do you have still full confidence in the police department and their abilities?
Absolute confidence in our police department. And this is one of the things that we have to learn to discuss. We have to have the ability to say, this occurred, we're gonna look into this, without people thinking that one question is a dismissal of the work that our police officers do. We have an amazing force. And make no mistake, people work on the force. Last I checked, none of them was Jesus. And, all of us are gonna make mistakes. And that doesn't mean that because we're flawed humans, that you don't support your team. I've always been a supporter of the TPD, and I will continue to be a supporter of the TPD. Now, just the same way that there would be accountability for me if I did something that was incorrect, there would be accountability for the individual that does something that is not correct. The court at this point in time will decide if there is something incorrect or not.
Moving back again to the creation of that position, you say a civilian, but theoretically, could there be an unbiased opinion if this person is still employed by the same people by the same city as the officers who are being reviewed.
I think that the answer to that is take a look at the conversation that we're having right now. I am not a police officer. I don't speak like Chief said earlier today, cop talk. Absolutely, there's a difference. It's, you see it in major corporations that you have. For example, I work for an electric utility, and you have engineers and you have HR people, and you will never have the two speak the same language because one of them speaks technical and the other one speaks people. So I think that no, I don't think that there would be a bias. I mean, we do, and one of the main reasons that you want to have somebody hired in the institution is that that person would be a direct report to the city manager, and that person does not have the day-to-day interactions. However, they would be privy to the training and to the things and the policies and the procedures, but they see it from a completely different perspective. So, but is it gonna be biased? Of course, if you do it from the community, there's gonna be bias as well. You could get somebody from the community that's a volunteer, that doesn't report to staff, but that already has a bias because they had a negative experience with the police department. Or you could find somebody that absolutely loves the police department because they had a family member, and that individual is gonna come and they're gonna have biases of their own. So anybody is gonna have a bias. But I think that as long as they are not an individual that has specific direct training and a history in law enforcement, you're going to see a completely different perspective than the individuals that are in the work every single day.
I hate to ask, but do you mind if Chief comes up, because we've got a couple questions about his thoughts on this, since it's a city manager?
Chief, please come forward.
Because we all have, I'm sure, follow-up questions as well for you, Chief, when it comes to what is discussed today. What are your thoughts in regards to the citizen position in the city to look over? Because yesterday, I actually asked you a specific question before Mayor Daley's press conferences. What about a civilian or somebody outside of the agency layer to your layers that you exposed?
Yeah, one of the things that the city manager mentioned when I was going through the hiring process was a civilian employee that worked in the professional standards unit as a member of the PSU unit, and that position would report directly to the city manager. The benefits of that is when that individual is involved in that review process, that they have somebody that they can go and talk to, express concerns, compliments, or whatever, but it's somebody that they don't report to the police department. But they are involved in those processes and understand those processes. And the key will be is finding an individual who is biased one way or the other. My daughter even asked me last night, so how do you find that person? I said, well, that's our job. That's what we're gonna have to do. And so that will be where we will call on the city of Topeka, members within the community to actually try to be involved in that process and how we identify who that person would be. But the benefits that the city gets out of it, not only the police department, but also the citizens and city government, is an independent, unbiased individual who reports directly to the city manager, who has the ability to make decisions, and we have direct conversation almost on a daily basis. And so that thought process there is that if they are uncomfortable with something they see, they have somebody outside of the police department that they can share that.
So you're in support of this?
Like I said, it was one of the things that I mentioned going through the hiring process. I do think that's when we talk about citizen involvement, citizen perspectives on issues, to me, this is one of the best fits. I've looked at a lot of things across the country and in different agencies and what they have, and this is something that I believe it was Denver, Colorado has very similar positions to this, and so I like kind of the way that looked. And Lieutenant Sturgeon was my project lieutenant who put this together and did that framework and all that, and that's why we already have a lot of this ready to go. And so it's just like the city manager said, kind of timing, finding the budget, identifying that position. So,
Chief, what can you tell us about the way Denver does things with this particular position?
well, the individual that is there with their PSU professional standards unit is involved in the investigations. Sometimes they do the investigation themselves. Sometimes they shadow the internal affairs lieutenant or commander. And what it does, it just kind of gives that oversight, the exterior set of eyes overlooking that process and evaluating that process and then providing information. And again, that individual does not work out of, for the police department, is actually assigned to a different part of the city government. And again, it's that nexus to where if they're not comfortable with something or whatever, they have somebody that they can talk to and report to.
And they're not just involved with use of force situations?
That's their primary one, is use of force. But they also do other citizen complaints, and I think that's important. That would be an important role of this position as well. A lot of times when individuals maybe want to file a complaint, we hear, well, I'm not comfortable talking to the police officers, I'm not comfortable coming into the police department or whatever. So having this civilian individual would be a perfect nexus there that would give them the ability to make the citizens maybe feel a little more comfortable that they're filing a complaint with actually another citizen as opposed to a law enforcement officer.
Knowing how the budget process works, what is the earliest such a job could be created as part of the city employee?
Well, it would make us reviewing what options we have based on positions that may be open now to be able to determine whether or not we can create the funding necessary for that kind of a position. So I think that's the key, is really studying where we're at with the budget, any positions that are not filled, whether or not we can move the salary towards that kind of to creation of this position.
This almost sounds like it would open up like a Pandora's box too. Would the citizens complain, all be able to complain also about, hey, I didn't like how this water utility guy turned off my water and said some bad words to me, or so on and so forth? Could it be an overall position, not just PD, but also?
Well, I think, my opinion, I think most of our departments handle the complaints that they receive. If they don't get service from the department itself, then it comes to my office, and then I either do the further in-depth review, talking to the citizen. Potentially.
Or it comes to the mayor a lot of times.
Yeah, and then the mayor gets a hold of me, and we end up having to talk about the issues that are there. And so, I mean, it's possible that that could be part of the position as well too. I think we have to determine what the workload is going to be as we look at professional standards and dig into that more before I would commit to how other job responsibilities would be for that position.
Would the city council need to be part of the process for creating such a position?
I think that's within my authority to go ahead and move forward with.
Even though it's not part of the budget?
Yeah, the bottom line is they approve the budget, the overall spending level, and then as city manager, if I feel we need to go a different direction relative to hiring, I have the authority to do so.
I think we're good.
Additional questions? All right, Topeka, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for the comments that you have been bringing to us. Again, I want to remind all of us that as we go throughout our daily activities, compassion goes such a long way. And I know that it may sound like something simple to do, but just always, with everything that we do, understand that each and every one of us is our own universe, with our own history. And when we deal with each other, whether it's face to face or even in social media, it's wonderful when we're able to do it with respect. We could disagree all day long. It's okay to disagree. Actually, what makes this nation so amazing is the fact that we can disagree all the time. It doesn't mean that we have to do it nicely, but we will get so much further if we would do it conversing and talking and discussing anything that we have to do. So thank you so much for your time, and we will see you next month.